introduction. Thank you. So early birds are on since yesterday, so you get $200 off. I think early bird is up until the end of the month. And you get a special discount, 20% off on the top of the $200 discount. If you talk to your Tableau reps in your organizations. If you don't know your Tableau reps in your organization, Karen just told us to send an email to our NZ event there. Anyone plan to go to the conference? I know one person is going. Paul, yeah, maybe. So you see, it will be in person. I don't know if it will be a virtual option, but if you can go, I'm happy to go this time. To share a poll. So I don't know if you guys know about R&Bs. Does no one want to know about R&Bs? R&Bs is a Tableau data competition. The theme was gaming, I believe. And Paul in the room here, Paul from Brisbane, or close enough, won the ticket. He won third prize globally. How did you finish first or second?
Well, in APAC it was first.
Yeah, APAC first.
It's yet to be decided where in the world. I'm up against a representative from the Americans and one from Europe. And,
so we're done. So I can't remember the numbers of submissions, few hundreds. I suspect Paul finished first in APAC, and it's going to be on stage, the conference, in front of thousands of people. Wearing a stupid t-shirt. It's like a Tom John West. Yeah. So I'll be there just to cheer up.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to make a t-shirt as well. Go for a t-shirt. So congratulations and your local staff. I've lost my thing here. Sorry. So today, the agenda is will be pretty amazing. You can see there's only one line, but it's going to be a packed training session that Andy Holt is going to deliver. So Andy, you can introduce yourself. We work for Woolies, we work with the company, which I think is pretty exciting. It will be all about parameters to make your dashboard better. So I think that's a pretty technical session. So it's not hands-on, don't take notes, but you can watch your recording. So if you got your laptop and try to do what Andy does, you'll be too quick. So don't even try. So just absorb and listen. We also have a few swags. So if you bend over your seats, you might find a sticker. Sorry for the online people. So see if under your seat there might be a Tableau sticker. If not, I've put a few t-shirts in the room if you can't find one. And you need to swap the slides. No? You need to swap the slides. For people in the room, if you got any questions, just put them in the chat, and maybe at the end we can just answer those questions. But
does anybody found one?
Any
interesting stickers?
Not even one.
oh, again. I think you might have one.
What do you know? Thanks, Andy.
Data to the people.
That's the one.
You got one?
Yeah.
Well, a t-shirt as well.
No t-shirt and cap?
T-shirt.
T-shirt?
Yeah.
What's your size?
Medium or large? Yeah. Wonderful.
Or just a normal Tableau t-shirt?
Oh, probably that one's best. Yeah.
What's the one more? Yeah, random t-shirt.
Okay,
That one.
cool.
T-shirt, Tableau t-shirt.
You're the rest of the chat. Awesome. Thank you for the welcome, Fred. I'd like to reiterate that welcome, both people in the room, but also people online. Thank you for joining. I hope the session is going to be of value. Before we begin, I'd just like to introduce myself. For those of you who haven't met, I probably know half of you in the room, but not the other half. So I'm a visualization lead in the People, Data and Insights team at Woolworths, as Fred said. In my previous role, I actually worked in this office. I was a senior consultant here at Key Data. I started using Tableau with either version 6 or version 7. I can never remember which, so it's either 2010 or 2011. So I've been using it a little while. And in my previous role, I was an accredited Tableau trainer, teaching Tableau the public classes as well as in-house ones for organizations. I say was accredited because to be accredited, you have to either work for Tableau or a Tableau partner, And so when I moved roles, then I lost that. To just give you an idea of kind of the size of Woolworths, I found some figures out this week which are kind of pretty mind-blowing. So Woolworths, in terms of Tableau, it's one of the biggest in APAC. So we've got a Tableau installation with 35,000 viewers. I forget how many explorers, but then there were 1,000 creators. So it's a pretty big installation. Okay, so my idea behind this session was to look at parameters within Tableau. They're an amazingly powerful, flexible tool that can really improve the experience that your users have with your dashboards. And I want to just give you some ideas about what you might be able to do with them. I tend to very quickly give an introduction to what parameters are. We'll look at the idea of dynamic parameters because they can be something that's really useful to incorporate into your dashboards before we move on to the meat of the session, which is parameter actions. We'll talk about what they are, how they build on parameters, and then I'm going to demonstrate a few different ways we can utilize them in a dashboard build. And then finally, I've collated a few other left field ideas to show you how you might use parameter actions to improve your users' experience of your dashboards. And understand that not everybody here is going to have the same experience using Tableau Desktop, but for time reasons, really, everything covered this afternoon is going to be approached with the expectation that you're at least somewhat competent with Tableau Desktop. As I said, I will spend a little time talking about parameters as a concept, as a way of introduction, but I really won't be dealing with all of the options you have there when you create a parameter. Also, I'm not going to be focusing on visual best practice in the things that I build in Tableau over the next wee while, but rather just functionality, use cases. So I realize that we could make things look better, but that's not the focus of today. And finally, before we begin, although I don't have any objections to questions as we're going along, probably what's going to be better is that there may be questions that we kind of want to push back to later, or there's good places to kind of stop just for questions as we're kind of going through. Otherwise, we'll deal with them at the end. We've got a fair chunk to cover, as Fred said. Not a heap of time to cover it. To cover everything we're going to look at, if we dealt with it as a training session, and did training session pace, then we'd be here well into the evening. So remember that this is a demonstration to give you inspiration and ideas rather than a training session to teach you how to do things. We're going to be going quite fast, so just bear in mind. And as Fred said, we're recording it, so you'll have that to kind of look back afterwards. Okay, if you've been using Tableau for any small amount of time, there's a fair chance that you'll have come across parameters. They're incredibly useful. We can set up a variable that can be changed by a user on demand. A parameter is a value that users can change by interacting with it to have control over what they're looking at. A parameter can be a string, it can be a date field, numeric, a Boolean, and we can use them to affect a reference line or color or sort order or what dimensions shown, or switching between measures or date granularity or moving average periods or the number of values shown in a top end filter, or chart titles, or for what if analysis, or tooltips, or for sheet swapping in dashboards. And that's just a selection. Amazingly, amazingly flexible. So parameters can be used in lots of different ways within a view. Incredibly powerful tool, as I hope that we're going to see today. The initial aspect I want to look at of parameters is making them dynamic, and particularly controlling what happens with them when you open a workbook or navigate to a published dashboard. There are two areas we can improve our users' experience with this functionality. So firstly, the value when the workbook opens, and then secondly, the way the possible values available in a parameter are populated. So firstly, setting the value of a parameter when a workbook opens. Okay, cancel that. And we go into Tableau. Okay, I just want to minimize the screen. It's going in my way here. Any idea? Anybody who uses Zoom? I can minimize that bit at the top. I've got a kind of banner across the top of my screen that is.
Again, just move it. Drag and move it.
Okay. It's kind of still. I thought I'd be able to minimize it. But...
Yeah.
Okay, it's less in the way there. So move that one as well. Apologies for those online. I'm sure you can't see what I'm talking about. Okay. So in this workbook here, we've got a very simple dashboard. We've got a band showing total sales. We've got a timeline for daily sales. followed by a cumulative timeline of the same data. And I've set up a parameter so that a user can check what sales were up to a certain day. So I've got my parameter up here. I can click on that. I can select a different date. And you'll see now that my total has changed. My title there has changed. The reference line's changed as well to kind of reflect it. However, there's a limitation. So this parameter is fixed. Ideally, I want this workbook to always select the most recent data point when the workbook opens. I don't want my users to constantly have to choose the latest value in the parameter. Or of course, even worse, I don't want them to forget to select the latest value when they open the workbook. Well, with dynamic parameters, you can choose the starting value of your parameter when a workbook opens. So if I go to that sheet, I've got my parameter down here, edit my parameter, and it brings up my parameter window. So we have this field down here, the value when the workbook opens. And by default, it's just set to be current value. So as I say, if I was to publish this to a server and open it, then that parameter would be set to the 9th of September. It isn't going to change. But we can set it to be based on a calculation. So I'm going to create a calculation, calculate a field. I'm going to call it my max dates. And I'm just going to use a fixed LOD calculation, so a fixed level of detail calculation that just pulls the max date. So this is going to look over the whole data set and just pull the max date. And now if I edit my parameter again, you'll see that when I look at the value when the workbook opens, I can now select that max date that I've selected there. So if I select that, click OK, you'll see it's already defaulted to the 14th of September. I'm going to close that for now. I just want to change the data, reopen this, and show you how that works. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to find my data, which I've lost. So 14th of Feb, the date we had there. Just going to extend that. Doesn't matter on the values. So you'll see now I've got down to the 27th of Feb. I'm going to close that. And I go back into Tableau and I reopen the correct workbook. You'll see now my selected date reflects that date I've got in my data. So your user now doesn't have to change that parameter. They don't have to remember to change it. It's always going to work. Really nice little quality of life change for your users. And of course, now I've got that, I don't actually need, no, that's later bit. We'll get rid of that later. We'll show you how to do that later. Okay, the second part of dynamic parameters I want to talk about is particularly when you've got a parameter that's got a list of values. It's handy to be able to set up what values a user can choose in a parameter, but it's got its limitations again. And where this functionality is handy is where data's coming in to your dashboard and the data changes, and you don't want to have to edit that list of allowable values when something new appears and then republish the workbook. So if I go to this other chart, what I have here as an example is I've got sales by city, and I've set up a parameter down here on the right-hand side that I can choose a city, and it will highlight in the chart the city I've selected and grey out the other ones. Very simple example. If we look at that parameter, so this is the selected city parameter, it's set up as a string. We've got a list and we've got Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney. To get it to this stage, I could have simply typed in my values. I could have auto-populated the list for one time from a field. However, now I've got this set up, I've got an issue. So let's say the business that has this dashboard, they start selling in Perth. And so you start getting new data, you've got Perth data in there, the line's not going to be there. So the line will appear in the chart, but we won't be able to select it in the parameter to be able to choose there. Because the possible values, as I say, are kind of hard-coded. And this is where the second dynamic parameters functionality comes in. So under the fixed option we've got here, we've got the value when the workbook opens. Again, similarly to when the value workbook opens up here that we just did to get the latest value. But what this one does is when you've got a list or also a range, but it allows you to choose a field that it's going to populate from. So now what happens when I open this workbook, it's going to look at that field, the city, and it's going to populate this list of allowable values within my parameter with those values. So again, to show you that working, I'm going to just click OK. I'm going to save that. I'm going to close it again. Go back into my spreadsheets. We've got allowable values. So I'm just going to take, doesn't have to be much, take those, doesn't need one of those, but as we said, they're going to start selling in Perth now. So a few days ago, they started selling in Perth. I close that. Again, back into Tableau. We open my workbook. And you can see now, as well as, well, theoretically, you can see. I'll move all this garbage out of the way. Cool. Okay, so you can see we've got the Perth line that we kind of talked about, but also I now have Perth in my parameter to be able to choose it. It's worth noting, as I said before briefly, that this functionality can be used for a range as well as a list, which is fine for something like dates. But if you want this intended use to be for numerical values from a measure, you need to bear in mind that it's going to populate based on the actual row level minimum maximum for that field. So not the min and max of an aggregated measure that is showing in a visualization. So you just need to be a little careful with that. Okay, so that was dynamic parameters, very brief introduction. One of those things we're going to look at and take a little bit further. But now we come to the main part of this afternoon's session. So parameter actions. So we're going to combine dashboard actions with parameters. So just like a filter action that you may have come across allows our users to interact with a visualization and apply a filter somewhere else, parameter actions allow them to interact with the chart and change the value held within that parameter, which we can use within many different ways within our dashboard. So to demonstrate that, the first thing, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the daily sales dashboard that I had there. And remember, we set it up so that the parameter defaulted to the max dates. We've done that already. But we still have that parameter control there and available for a user to look at a different date range. What I want to do, though, is improve the user experience, take that a little bit further. And so rather than them having to play with this parameter and click and kind of find a date on there, what I want them to do is I want them to be able to click on either of these two timelines, and then that will set the parameter. You know, so often with all the kind of the tablets and phones and stuff we do nowadays, we click on a screen. We don't want to be interacting with this. So that's what we're kind of looking to do here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to dashboard. I'm going to go to my dashboard actions, and I'm going to add an action. And so here you've got the 6 different sort of dashboard actions you can add, but the one we want is we're going to change a parameter. I'm going to click OK. Normally, if I was doing this, I'd kind of be naming my parameter action to kind of keep it nice and neat and tidy so you know what's going on. You can have parameter 1 up to parameter 20 if you want to, but trying to find the right one, I really don't recommend it. So what's my source sheet? So what's going to drive this sheet? Well, as I said, I want to click on either of my 2 timelines to be able to do this. I want it that when I select, the target parameter is my date parameter, and I want to populate that with my day of date. So what this is going to do now is when I click on either of these 2 sales charts, it's going to populate that parameter with the value that it finds from the date. And of course, we know that when you change the parameter value, it's going to change all those things on the chart. It's going to change your title, it's going to change your reference lines, it's going to change the total that's displayed there, and so on. And so click OK, and now I can click there, and it does that exactly. It's a lot easier for a user to kind of find a date, click on it, and we get that same functionality. And of course, we don't need that parameter action anymore. That parameter being displayed, we can get rid of it, and it's all well and good. And of course, from what we did earlier, when a user opens a workbook, that parameter is always going to be set back to the maximum value. Okay, at this point, if this was a dashboard that others are going to be using and interacting with, then I'd want to let my users know about that functionality that I've added. Remember, they're not mind readers. If you're going to be building in functionality like this, you need to let your users know. So I'd probably add a line of text somewhere visible, maybe a subheading underneath the dashboard title, maybe even a note on the tooltips of all of the 3 different sheets that when people hover over it, it lets them know if you click, we can interact with that parameter. Exact wording to be decided, but yes, if you're going to build interactivity like this that isn't exposed, isn't easily, you've got to let your users know that it's going to be there. What I want to do now is show you how parameter actions can be used in a number of different ways to add interactivity to our dashboards, and then step you through how we might go about doing that. Firstly, though, I want to show you where we're going to end up. So I can close that one. Okay, so when we open this dashboard that I've created, initially it looks kind of empty, but that's by design. I want to drive our users to make a choice about which measure they wish to investigate. So what I've got here, and again, as I've just talked about, I've put instructions to let them know. Select a measure to populate the dashboard. If I was to click on sales, I'm now going to get that populated. You'll see actually the sales is colored to let them know that is the one that's selected. We've got my daily sales there. I've got a bar chart of sales here. I can also choose the granularity of my bar charts. And then also I've got to drill down to the next level. So let's say I select country. If I want to look below country, I can click that, and it's only going to do it for the bar I've selected. It's not going to do it for everything else. If I want to look at profit instead, I can click on profit and do that. Also, a little functionality, as it says there, click and drag to select a date range. So if I want to, just like we were doing before, clicking and selecting a date, if I want to select a date range, here now I can click and drag a range of dates, and it's going to select from the max and the min that I've got there within that. And then finally, we've got a little reset button that puts it back to the beginning again. All of this is built with parameter actions. So we're going to build that now. We're not going to build all of it. We're just going to build bits of it. I've got different workbooks. It's kind of almost like, I don't know if any of you, did you ever have Blue Peter in this country? Do you know Blue Peter? No? Okay. Any British people? No?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Okay. So Blue Peter, you know what I mean? Where when I'd said the idea of, they always kind of were doing these demonstrations, they'd say, here's one I prepared early. So rather than kind of working through all the steps, they'd kind of do a little bit and then bring out the next step. So that's what we're going to do with this workbook. I'm not going to build this completely from scratch because we would be here all night doing that. Okay, so now I can close this one. Close that completely. And so now we're up to number 4. Cool. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look to recreate in our dashboard is the bands. So the numbers at the top and the functionality that allows a user to click on one of those and change what measure is displayed in the rest of the dashboard. So things I've already got in place is that I've created a parameter. And so if I go to add a new sheet, we'll need in a minute. So I've created this parameter already, my selected measure. And so what it is, it's a string, and it's got all of the different measures that I want to select. So that's how we're going to control which measure we're looking at. I've also got a calculation. So it is my selected measure calculation. And so what this is doing is dependent on the value of the parameter that we've just shown. It's going to choose the measure, but also the aggregation of that measure that it's going to display. So it's kind of pulling those out. Could be sum, could be average, count distinct, and so on. So that's already been set up. And then the timeline is built using that selected measure calculation that we're just looking at. And also the bar chart is built using that selected measure as well. So as you'll see, if I go back to my timeline, I've got the parameter there. If I was, old school, changing the parameter by kind of clicking on the parameter button, it's going to change the measure that I've got displayed within my chart. Okay, so that stuff we're going to take as read. We're not going to talk about doing that. We've got the parameter, we've tied it to a calculation, we've used the calculation within our visualization. So what I'm going to do now is we need to create our bands, our numbers at the top. And I'm going to start with sales. So I've got my new sheets. I'm going to take sales. I'm just going to drop it into my window. I'm going to just format that to size 20. I'm going to make it bold. And I'm going to format that to center and middle. And I'm actually going to change the title here as well, just so we're looking at sales. Okay, if I go back to my dashboard, I've actually kind of populated some spaces up here ready for it to go. So I'm going to take my sheet 8 I've just built, and drop it into there, get rid of one of those, click to entire view to kind of fit. And so we've got the band there. Okay, so now the key thing here is that I need a way of populating our parameter when that band is clicked. And the way we achieve this is by adding a text field to the sales sheet. So a couple of different ways we can do that. I can either just build a calculated field that I'd call that sales, for example, and if I type correctly, I call that sales. So all that's going to do is just create a calculation that's just going to say sales all the way down. An alternative to do that is I can use an ad hoc calculation. I don't use them often, but this is one place I do it. I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm just creating a field that basically is just going to be sales all the way down. Just be clear. Cool. It might be for you, but I only study to read my notes. No, it's all good, thanks. I'm joking. It's fine. I'm not that old yet. Okay. Okay, so I've added sales to this new sheet. So if I go back to my dashboard again now, so what I want to do is, as I say, I want to click on this button just like we had in the demonstration, and I want to populate my parameter that we looked at. I'm going to display the parameter so we can see what's going on. So at the moment it sets profit. I want that when I click on sales, it's now going to change that to sales for me. And just like we did before, I'm going to create a parameter action, add an action, and change that. I want it to only be based off sheet 8, the one I just built. And I have it when I select. The target parameter is going to be my selected measure, so my parameter there. And what do I want to populate it with? I want to populate it with that field, sales, the ad hoc field I've just created. And so that's why you've got to add that to that sheet. If you didn't add that text field to that sheet, doing one of the two ways, ad hoc field or a separate field you create, it wouldn't be available for you to select there. So you need to do that. I'm going to click on OK, click OK, and OK. And so now when I click on sales, you'll see that my measure changes. And now I've got sales selected and everything else is sales. I'll go to quantity. I click back on sales. And it's going to change again. And that's it. When I click on the sales figure, you'll see the timeline, the bar chart change to reflect the selected measure. We can also see that in the parameter itself, as I said, which is why I displayed it, just to have it displayed while we're working to make sure everything's kind of working as it's desired. Something else, though, we can do here is the formatting. So formatting that text based on whether the selected measure or the respective measure is selected or not. As you saw with the example I had, that when I click on it, it went blue to let you know that was the one it selected. So I'm going to go to the sheets and I'm going to build a calculation. It's going to be called sales is selected, and it's simply going to be whether my parameter equals sales. So I can so you can see. So that's all I'm doing. Simple Boolean, true or false. Is the parameter equal to the value of sales? I click OK. I'm going to drag that onto my color. And at the moment, it's blue because it's true. I'm going to show that parameter so I get the option of the false. If I change it to profit, it's false. So then I can go in if I wanted to and change the color. And for now, we'll just leave the same as it is. So sales is that blue, profit is that. You can play with the colors as you like. So now we need to add in the other bands, the other measures. We're not going to do all of them, but I do have one already built down here, profits. So you'll see it's got a profit value. I've got profits built on there. I can drag that to my charts. I can set that to entire view. And I need to add another dashboard action. So I'm going to change the parameter value. This time, it's when I select my profit band. Select, target parameter is going to be exactly the same, but my source field is going to be profit now. So again, just like we had before, I click OK, I click OK. If I click on sales, it changes to sales. If I click on profit, it changes to profit, just like we had before. One thing to note at this point, a bit of an aside, is the different behavior of the two bands. So I have set them up slightly differently. So the sales one, when you click on it, it gets that horrible blue thing that kind of Tableau does. When you click on the profit one, it hasn't. There's a couple of ways to get rid of that blue highlighting when selecting to need to go to the dashboard. 2 or 3, but 2 mainly. Both are well documented online. The first involves some really weird stuff with a filter action, a highlight action, and true and false fields. It's kind of bizarre. The second one, and the one that I've used here for the ban, involves using transparent shapes. I'm not going to delve into how to do that now, but it's just something that to look up in your own time. You know, it's obviously a lot nicer for your user that they don't have that blue kind of outline selected. It just makes it a lot nicer. And also, there's a thing that if I'd have to unselect sales to kind of select it again. It's kind of this whole weird thing. But yeah, plenty online about that. I do have a great link. Somebody shared on Twitter last night, kind of a whole document talking through all the 3 different techniques of doing that. Come and see me afterwards. I'm able to share that if you want to see it. But say, great little extra tip there. So I'm not going to go through the same process with all of the other measures. You know, you don't need to sit and watch me do that. It's all identical. But 2 things I want to add at this point before we move on. So firstly, the reset button. So at the moment, by the nature of the parameters, we must always have a measure selected. Within this parameter here, I've just got the measures. I don't have anything else, right? We can't select no value in a parameter. But as you saw when I showed the finished dashboard, I want my users to be enter the dashboard with nothing there, but also have the ability to kind of reset it as well and have nothing there. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to add an extra allowable value to the parameter. So I'm just going to edit my parameter from here, edit my parameter, and I'm simply just going to add the value of reset. Okay. So at the moment, it's not done anything. All I've done is select that option. Okay. And now if I was to choose reset, it's basically going to break the dashboard. We've set it so that the parameter set to something where no measure is chosen, which of course is going to break those charts. We'll come back to those in a moment. Firstly, though, we're going to want to use the reset button to achieve that same thing. So at the moment, you know, I've got sales. I haven't tied it to that reset button yet. We have to use the parameter control. So I want to tie it to that button. And just like the bands, you know, we want to be able to set the value of that parameter. Okay, so I'm going to go to my reset sheet that I've already set up. And I'm going to, I'll do this the other way around. So calculate field, I'm just going to call this reset text. It's just going to be a text string, exactly the same as before. Click OK, and I want to drag that to the detail on this sheet again, so we can select it with the actions. Go back to my dashboard, another dashboard action. Change my parameter value. So on this one, and actually that's a little tip I just want to show. I'm just kind of doing that quite fast, but that's well worth knowing. When you're going to get a dashboard, you end up with lots of sheets. And if you're selecting or deselecting a lot of them, it can be a real pain. But there's a great little tip that if I was to Control A and space, it will select all of them. If I was to Control A and space, used to work, but it doesn't in this version, which is a pain, but I can click on one of the arrows and it will deselect all of them. Great little tip for saving time rather than kind of having to click on each of them individually. Okay, so I want my reset sheets, select. I want to, of course, change my selected measure parameter, and I want to populate it with that text that's in the reset text. I click OK, click OK, and now it works. When I click on my resets, it is going to set the parameter reset just as we'd like. We've still got the problem though of the charts, and so we need to kind of loop back to those. So these look ugly at the moment when no measure's chosen, right? I want to hide them so they're not displayed when the parameter is set to this value, and we can do this with a filter. So I'm going to go to my timeline. I've got a calculation I've already built, just as we kind of did before. Simple Boolean, is the selected measure equal to reset? And I want to select something else on that, actually. I want to drop that there because on the filter, I want to be able to choose false. So basically what that says is if reset is chosen, then the chart's hidden. If it's anything else, then it's going to show the chart. Then with this filter, I want to apply it, selected sheets, I want to apply it to my bar chart as well, rather than having to go to there. It's easier to do it that way. One filter controls both of those. Back to here, I click on my reset button. And the charts go away. You've got none of that ugly axes. You don't get kind of the null values type thing. Just makes it look a lot nicer. Okay, any questions before we move on? Still plenty to do, but I know I've kind of covered a lot. Anything?
Control X.
Yeah, that Control A is great. It saves loads of time. Absolutely. If there's one thing you take away from this presentation, David, it's okay. So the next version of the workbook, as you can see, is one I prepared earlier. I now have all my bands. I have my reset button all working nicely. So the next thing we're going to do is incorporate that date filter. So similarly to how we did before, but this kind of takes it a little stage further, and it's kind of a really nice. So this allows our users to click and drag on the timeline chart to filter the rest of the dashboard. And the key concept we're going to make use of here is that within a parameter action, there's an option to choose an aggregation. In other words, what happens to a parameter action or to a parameter when you choose more than one mark? Yep. Because remember, a parameter can only store one value. So if you choose more than one, you need to tell Tableau what you want it to do. Depending on the data type of your parameter, you can have different aggregation options. So if I was to go to, for example, my, the parameter action I want to go to, so dashboard and actions. So you'll see now I've started to name all my parameters so I know what they all are. It's not just parameter one up to parameter whatever. You're going to get a lot. Make it clear, make it easy for yourself, make it easy for somebody else who's going to be using your dashboard, working on your dashboard if you're not the sole person kind of creating it. So if I go to the selected measure equals sales, for example, I click OK. I've got this aggregation, so just here. So we've got that. We've not looked at it so far yet, but this one, so this is a string that we've got here. And so the different aggregation options I've got, I can choose the minimum, I can choose the maximum, I can choose to concatenate. If we had a numerical field, we have a lot of possible options we could choose, including the ones you use most would be sum, average, as well as maximum, minimum. And for a date field, we have max and we have min, and that's what we're going to use here. It's kind of quite a clever way of doing it. So I've already created the parameters I need. So if I went to my timeline sheets, so you'll see I've got my parameters. I've got a max date selected parameter and a min date selected parameter, and all they are, if I open them, they're basically the same, just with a different name. They're a date field. I've already set them, just like we did in the previous way, that when the workbook opens, the max one is going to be the max of your dates. The min is going to be the min of your dates, so you can set them in the same way. So that's already been set up. And then in terms of the allowable values, I actually don't need to change that. I can leave that on all, because users aren't going to be able to change this value of parameter any other way by clicking on your chart. So you don't actually need to specify kind of that range. If I wanted to, I could do and specify it from dates, give that range, but It's easier if you just kind of leave it to allowable values. Okay, so I've got those two parameters, the max and the min. Okay, so setting up the dashboard action, that's the next stage. And we're going to need two here. So we need one to populate the max date parameter, and we need one to populate the minimum date parameter. So if I go to the dashboard, I'm going to add an action exactly the same way. I'm going to add a parameter action. Again, I would be renaming this if we were doing it properly, but Control A, deselect, just like we were talking about. And I just want this to work when I select timeline. I want it on select. I want it to change my max date selected parameter. And I want it to be populated from the day of the date. But the key thing here now is we've got the aggregation, and I want it to be the maximum. Okay. And I'm going to do the same, exactly the same, changing the parameter value. Oops, missed. For my timeline, this is going to be the minimum one, so I want to populate my min date selected. My source field is going to be date, and so this one will be my minimum. And click OK, and OK. Again, I'm just going to expose those parameters while we kind of build it, just so that you know that it's working. You know, always kind of just show this stuff and make sure you're working. So at the moment, you've got the min date, you've got the max date, which is the whole of that range. But if I was to click and drag a range of dates, you'll see now that my date range has changed. It's looking at all of those points I've got selected. It's saying, what's the minimum date? Okay, I'll put that in the min date selected parameter. What's the maximum date? I'll put it in the max date selected parameter. It's a great way, one selection, you've populated those two parameters at the same time using that aggregation. It's a great little tip. Okay, of course, we haven't tied the parameters to anything in our dashboard though. So although we're changing the parameter values, it's not actually doing anything yet. In my finished version I showed you, we had a couple of things going on. So firstly, I want to use a reference band on the timeline chart, coloring to show the range currently selected. So I can do that from here. I'm going to right click, I'm going to add a reference line. I actually want a band across the whole table. The values I want to run from the min date selected to the max date selected. For ease, I'm just going to hide those and click OK. And there we already have now our reference band that shows what our range is that we've got selected. Just another little tip, you know, kind of just shows, okay, this is the range. But the other thing we had as well was obviously kind of coloring it. So then we had the gray for the stuff that wasn't selected, and we had the blue for the stuff that was selected. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my timeline. I've already created a calculation, just called this date colors. And I've actually got three things here above, below and in. You could do that with two using an and you just want outside and in. You know, just I've got three in this example here, but yeah. So basically, we're kind of just setting, okay, is the date of your chart, is it within your range or is it outside of your range? So I can simply drag that onto colors, wait for it to think, and we've got exactly what we need. So now, as well as changing the reference line, it also changes a bit of the chart that you've got selected as well. Again, make it easier for your users to see. You know, now they can see, okay, well, I've got sales selected. I know it's this date range, and so on. The other thing I had as well is, yeah, make it easier for your users. I'm going to, on the subtitle just here, let them know what period they've got selected. So because it's using a parameter, I can put that in the title and put the value in the title. So I'm going to choose it's for the period from the min date through to the max date. Click OK, and there we go. And now our title changes when we select a different range. Again, make it transparent to your user exactly what it is that you've got there. One final thing we'd need to do is make use of the reset button, again, to reset that date range. Again, there's two parameters, so we need two actions. But before we do that, we need to make sure that the max order date and the min order date, that those fields are available to the reset action. Just like we did before, you need to make them available to the sheet that you're going to populate the action from. Otherwise, you can't select them. So I'm going to go to my action sheets. I've got my max order date and my min order dates. I'm just going to click and drag those to, click and drag those to detail. I just want the discrete date, and the min order date, exactly the same, click OK. As I say, I do that so that I have the option within the parameter action to select them. Go back to my dashboard. It's reset, so we can't see what's going on. There we go, select something. So again, actions, dashboard action. We're going to add a parameter value. And this one, when I select the reset, I want to populate my min date with the value from my min of the date orders. Okay, and exactly the same for the max. So again, reset, sorry, not timeline. Max order date is populated from the max order date field. Click OK, click OK. So now when I click reset, you'll see my parameters have gone back to where they should be. Resets everything. Okay, so now we've done the bands, we've done the reset button tied to them, we've done the selecting the dates within the timeline, tying that to a reference line, tying that to kind of coloring and calculation, tying that to the subtitle. So the next stage we want to look at comes down to here in the bar chart. So I'm going to close that and go to number 6. Okay. So the first thing we need to look at on this is the buttons that choose the granularity down here that we've got selected on the bar chart. So if I go to my granularity sheets, I've already built the buttons here. I've used a little trick where I just copied and pasted from a text file in order to create this data source. So if I was to look, not edit data source, don't do that. If I just view the data, that's what I wanted to do. So I've got some calculations in there. If you need, ignore those. But all I did was I simply had a text field, or it could do it from Excel or something like that, that just had a field name, so granularity, and I just had 4 values below it. And I just copied and pasted that into my workbook, created an extract for it. I could have had live connection for the other one, but an extract for that one. But it doesn't have to be related to the main data source in any way at all, because all we're going to use it for is building the buttons themselves and then populating a parameter via parameter actions. And so if you think about parameters, the great thing about them is that they hold a value across your whole workbook. They're not dependent on the data source or whatever. So all I'm using this data source for is to build those buttons and then to populate my parameter. So it's another nice little trick for doing this sort of thing. You've got to be careful if you're going to publish this to a server about kind of refreshing the extract and all that sort of stuff. You might want to publish one of them and not the other one. So a few things around there, but yeah, this does allow you to do that. Okay, so firstly, what we need to do is create the parameter that allows us to control the granularity. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a parameter. I'm going to call that, never type when people are watching me. Selected granularity, I want it to be a string. Let's do it from a list. I want it to be fixed, but I want to add the values from my clipboard field from granularity. So it gives me my market, country, state. Nice little, great little tip there with parameters. You can just populate a list like that. You don't have to type them all in individually. You can populate from fields. Similar to what we did before with the cities, but this one's fixed. This one isn't going to take the time to look at that field every time you open it, because I know that this isn't going to change. And then I can click OK. And then we need to add a parameter action such that when we click on a button, it changes that parameter value to that value that I've clicked on, the button I've clicked on. So I'm going to go to my dashboards and actions. And you see now we're getting quite a few different actions by this stage. So as I say, keep stressing, name your actions. So this one is going to be that when I click on my granularity sheet, so the buttons, I want to populate my selected granularity that I just created with the value of the granularity from the field. Click OK, click OK. Again, I want to test it, so I'm going to display my parameter up here. When I click on a button, it's going to change the value I've got in my selected parameter. Great, just taking it a little bit further from what we've done so far. And again, though, it isn't doing anything for it at the moment. All we're doing is populating that parameter by clicking on the screen. We haven't actually tied it to our dashboard anyway. Also, I'd want to add another button, another action to the reset button as well at this stage, so that when I clicked on the reset, it no, I don't appear to be. No.
All good now.
All good?
Yeah.
Awesome, cool. Cool, thank you, Fred. So all I'm going to call this is button is selected. Again, it's just going to be a Boolean. So is my granularity, oops. It's not going to do that because it's in the wrong data source. So I have to be careful there. I want to be creating it in this data source. So button is selected. It probably didn't matter, but just for cleanliness, button is selected. So it's going to be whether my granularity equals my selected granularity parameter. There we go. So just like we've done before, it's just simple Boolean testing. You know, is that the same? Click OK. I can then drag that to my color, and it's going to color the button I've got selected. Again, playing with the buttons, making sense. I'm not going to, make you watch me change the colors of the buttons, but when I click, it changes the color again, making them easy to see. Okay. So now, though, we want to use that granularity parameter. If we go to the bar chart, so you'll see that at the moment we're slicing the data by market, but instead I want to slice it by the value of that granularity parameter. So I need a calculation to reflect that. So I'm going to create a calculation. I'm going to call it selected granularity. And this one just takes a little time to type out. Bear with me. So when, make it bigger so you can see. Okay, when the value of that parameter is market, then I want my market field. When the value of that parameter is country, I want my country fields. When it is state, I want my state fields. And when it is city, I want my city field. Okay, so then I've got my selected granularity. I can take that, drop it over the market field, dropping it over it. We get the little black outline that's going to replace that field. And then I want to sort descending. If I go back to my dashboard, make sure it's working. So now we've got market. Now I've got my countries. Now I've got my states. Now I've got my cities. So that's all working there. So we're almost done in terms of this demo. You'll be pleased to hear we're almost there. The final thing we just need to do is just the drill down. So in the demo, remember what I had was that when I clicked on a bar, I wanted it to actually see the next level down, but only for the bar that I selected. So again, we need a parameter action, and we need a related calculation, just like we've done so far. So firstly, a new parameter. So it's a bar chart sheets. I'm going to create a new parameter. So oops, I don't know where I'm clicking. There. Create a new parameter, and this one is going to be called the selected drill down. And it's going to be a string. For now, the current value, oops, I'm just going to put none, just kind of clean it out. That actually isn't none, it's not a null value, it's none in text, but just doing it to clean out, but there, and we click OK. Okay, so then we've got the selected drill down. So then next parameter action. So I want to, first I'm going to expose that parameter again. Always test what you're doing, make sure it's working. So my selected drill down and my dashboard action. Again, another parameter action. This one is going to be when I click on my bar charts, then I want to populate my selected drill down that I just created. And the value I want to populate it with is the selected granularity. So basically the label at the end of the bar. What is that bar that I'm clicking on? And click OK. Click OK. So again, all we've done so far, we've got the parameter, we've got the action. When I click on that, you'll see that my selected drill down changes to what I have selected. If I go to country, it still does it there. So that's one of the reasons in that example that you wouldn't choose a list of values, you just leave that on all, because you can't populate it from one field, because it's effectively coming from 4 different fields. You just want a text field that can take any value. Okay, and I'm just going to put that back to none just for now. Oops, that says none. So none. Okay. So now when I click on the bar, as we've seen, it's going to populate the new parameter with whatever the header of the bar is. But I need a calculation now, again, just like we've had before, to tie that to your visualization with what you're doing. So I'm going to go to the sheet again. I need to create another calculation. And yeah, I don't have this one created, which is a shame, but okay. This is going to be my selected granularity +1, so like the next level down. And again, this one just takes a little time to type. If my selected drill down equals none, and there's a that's why the reason I was kind of putting none in there, then I just want an empty text field. So it's not going to drill down on anything else. If my selected drill down equals my selected granularity, then we get a case statement. So depending on what the value of the selected granularity is, I should have this open to copy and paste. And similar to what we had before, when market, then, but we want it to be the next level down. So when market, I want to display country. When country, then I want the state fields. When state, then I want my city fields. And when city, again, I just want an empty text field. So I'll end my case statement, else, empty text field, and end. Okay, not going to go into too much detail about what's happening there, but basically what's happening is, in simple terms, that when the granularity of the bar is the same as the new drill down parameter that I've selected, then I'm going to display the next level down in the geographical hierarchy. Okay, So I've got that new calculation, my drill down +1. And just for ease now, I'm actually going to create a hierarchy just by dragging them over the top. So I've got there. And the great thing about that means that I've already created a sort on this one. Now I want to drill and display the next level down. It's also going to have that sort in there as well. And now that should work. That's if I was to change that to none. So what I'm not going to do as well is that what you need to do is on the reset button, you need to set it so that when you click reset, it sets that parameter value to none. So I'm just going to do that by manually. So there we've got nothing in the drill down. But if I was to select APAC, it's going to drill down on the APAC bar. Again, I'm going to just click put none in. If I was to go to states, and I'm going to click down on California. Again, it's just going to show the cities under there. In the example as well, I then colored it as well, whether it's in or out, to kind of show, okay, the bars that we're looking at as opposed to the other ones. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. In the original version, I added a little bit more in terms of cosmetics with regards to titles and instructions, a couple of additional dashboard actions to clean things up a little bit more, tie a couple of more things to the reset buttons we talked about, but not really anything significant beyond what we've just covered. Lastly, I want to very briefly show you some other possible use cases for parameter actions. We're not going to look at how to build them. I just wanted to show you just to kind of inspire different ways of doing stuff. So this first one is an alternative sort of drill down. So similar to what we had with the previous one. So in the previous dashboard, we were expanding a selected bar to view the next level down in the hierarchy. But what we've got here instead is that we're effectively going to filter on the selected bar and expand to the next level down. So demonstrate what I mean, makes it a lot clearer. If I was to click on APAC, so at the moment, so read the label, we've got total sales for all by market. If I click on APAC, I'm now showing total sales for APAC by country. If I was to select Australia, I now have total sales for Australia by state, and Queensland, total sales for Queensland by city. So again, kind of drill down, but just changing that functionality up a little bit. And of course, we have the reset button just working in the same way. So the next thing we've got is some toggle buttons. Sorry, yeah.
Drill out button. Drill out button or drill down.
I'm sorry?
In the previous slide,
yeah,
you drill down. Does it have drill out?
No, it doesn't at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. You could potentially do that. You wouldn't have it on click. What you could do is put it in the menu. So you know when you're setting a dashboard action, or any action actually, but if we've got a parameter action like that one there, then at the moment I'm doing it based on select. I could do something based on menu, and then I can have a menu that when you hover over it, it appears in the tooltip, and I can have drill up or can have drill down kind of appearing there. So that would be a way you could get the drill up to work. Good question, thank you. So the next is some toggle buttons. So just some custom UI buttons that you could do. So firstly, we've got a toggle button that just goes on or off that you can have your users to have. The next one is a multi-toggle button. So we've got 4 buttons and we can select one of them at a time. Or maybe multi-select. So we can select multiple buttons at the same time. Or taking that a step further, we've got a multi-select, but we have an all that allows us to turn all on and off as well. So just extra things you could add to a dashboard to just increase that kind of user experience. The next one we've got is sort of related to the example we had before in the dashboards, where again, we're using bands to change what we see viewing below. But this time, instead of changing a measure, what we're doing now is actually applying different filters over that same dashboard. So this isn't sheet swapping, we're actually kind of changing the filters. So here we've got all cities selected. Maybe I just want to look at cities with orders in March 18, or maybe I just want to look at cities with orders on a particular date, or look at cities that order tables from California and Texas, and so on. And so if you've got a dashboard and you've got like exception reporting and you've got questions that people always want to look at, this would be kind of a great way of kind of setting that up. You're able just to kind of switch between and filter between your charts using that same functionality. Again, all parameter actions. And then the final one is something I worked actually when I was here at Key Data. This, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody kind of do anything like this before, but so I kind of call it cascading hierarchical filters. On the face of it, it looks like a simple bar chart, but the first bit of functionality we've got is being able to click on these little red X's, and that removes them from the bar charts. Okay, but you need to obviously be able to add things back in again. So we've got a collapsible container. Okay, which opens this little window here, and where we've got kind of a drill down. And the point of difference about this that's different to kind of maybe the built-in UI that you've got within Tableau, because it's just a filter really, but what we're doing, but it allows you to see, okay, I just want to look at what's in furniture. And so I want to add in things from furniture. Office supplies, I actually want to take my office supplies, and I want to take out my technology. I also then have a button just to collapse the drill down and go back to kind of the beginning. And I've also then got actually a reset button to get rid of everything. If I had more time at some point, I'd really like to kind of add a select all button here. I'd like to add something that you can click on furniture and it's going to add all the furniture or remove them all at the same time. Just not had a chance to kind of do that yet. But all of this is built within, we're using 5 parameter actions. Again, just parameter actions, exactly the same as we've done it. Uses parameters in a slightly different way, but yeah. So yeah, that's parameter actions in just less than an hour, maybe. Incredibly powerful. As I say there, you can use them for all sorts of things. That really is just kind of a flavor. The only limit is your imagination, pretty much. I hope you've seen something today that you can take away and implement in your own dashboards and your own work. If this is something of interest to you, then I can highly recommend Googling the topic to see what else people are doing using this functionality. There's an awful lot out there. Any questions to finish up? I know there's more. Yeah, absolutely.
And for people on Zoom, just turn the microphone on and ask questions on the chat. Any questions? Maybe a comment.
Andy,
Wow.
do you have any of these examples on your Andy Holt Tableau public site?
Probably this one. To be honest, it's the hierarchical filters one would be there, but yeah, probably not the rest at this stage. But I do have a workbook that I could probably, yeah, like the finished example of where we got to with that dashboard that I could probably publish to kind of find for that. Yeah.
Any questions?
Maybe just,
Comments?
I don't know if it's just a silly question or not, but
So people can.
what's the ban?
Oh, a ban. Okay,
Yeah.
so sorry, using terminology. So
It's here,
yeah, big ass number.
Okay.
So yeah, at the top of your dashboard where you have those. Other people might not say ass. I don't know what they kind of do in certain.
Big ass number.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
That's what it's called.
big ass number. It's banned, so.
GDPR. Not a stupid question. That's a good question. People online, any questions? Comments? Very inspiring, I think. Thanks a lot for now.
As I say, I realized there was an awful lot we covered.
I'm glad it's recorded so we can watch in slow motion and slow motion and do it again.
Yes.
If we don't have any questions, thanks, Annie. Big clap.
Yeah.
It's not to cover, you spend a lot of time and hours doing that, showing your skills. I think it's really so fast. Thanks again. We're gonna have some drinks and pizza.
Yeah, so there's pizza in the kitchen. There's drinks in the fridge. We'll pull a few out. I understand Fred's a bit of a ping pong player.
Or
So,
energies as well.
I think there's a bit of a challenge down there for anyone who thinks they can beat Fred.
Just as a close comment for people who have just been for the first time, we usually meet every 12 months. So we're in Feb, so next one will be April. So we got a couple of presenters. Yeah, what's your topic again?
It's on like using configuration files to work with API, Tableau.
So Tableau API.
Oh, that's a great one.
But if anyone else is keen to present, share tips and tricks. Today was a bit special, it was more like a comprehensive demo.
Yeah.
because we just want to get the best of Andy's brain. So in 5 minutes it doesn't work. And you can come back to cover something else as well. But if you've got any things you want to share with us, Tableau tricks, whatever, something you created for work or personal, just scream out and we'd be happy to just put you on the stage and present. Oh,
And 10 or 15 minutes, it all needs to be right. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be, don't think that this is normal. Like,
Yeah.
so.
And so don't forget the Tableau conference, and then we'll have someone to chair as well. So Paul, for people that are not here before, Paul qualified and he's going to the US.
Okay.
He came first at R&B's, first in APAC. I don't know what, 500 submissions or more. I was crazy number of submissions on you. First submissions, first time you submitted, and he's still doing that Tableau, so it's pretty cool.
Have we talked us through your viz yet, Paul, at some point?
I have now.
Do you want to do it? You just bring a browser and then do it?
Well, I mean, I was thinking kind of a session, talking,
yeah.
some point, getting him to talk through what he's done, and I think that'd be great.
Before or after TC? What do you
I'd,
prefer? After.
probably after would be better.
So
Yeah,
May,
that's
June.
when you can talk about the experience. as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And wear your winning jersey.
That's right.
So thanks for people online joining us. Next time you can come. Maybe not Chris because you want to pay for your flight, but and then we see each other in a couple of months. Cool. Thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks.
Recording.
I would suggest.